Welcome to B2B Sales Trends, the podcast dedicated to sales leaders in the B2B space, where we share conversations about innovative and successful sales transformations to keep you up to date on the latest trends. This podcast is brought to you by Global Performance Group.
Welcome to our latest episode of the B2B Sales Trends podcast, my lovely people. The show that brings you hacks, tips, thought leadership for B2B selling. My name is Kendlbacher, and today's episode, I have with me Mike Lander. Mike is the CEO of Piscari and a procurement expert who knows everything about the buying world. And I'm super pleased to have him on our episode today. Welcome to the B2B Sales Trends podcast, Mike.
Harry, thanks ever so much for having me. Really looking forward to this.
Mike, share with us a little bit about yourself. Do us a little bit of an intro before we dive into the topic of today.
Sure. So I guess for the listeners, obviously mainly a kind of sales commercial audience, my unusual thing is I'm an ex-buyer. So I was an ex-procurement director working in private equity-backed funds often, working with portfolio companies, trying to improve EBITDA. And I say improve EBITDA because it's easy to think all procurement care about is reducing cost. But actually what we're trying to do is, we're trying to, increase bottom line EBITDA, often through obviously delivering savings, but also managing quality and managing risk and looking for innovation and all those good things. So my background is ex kind of procurement director. I now work with sellers. So I've moved from being the buyer to now working with salespeople and helping them understand how to qualify better, how to convert more, and how to negotiate more profitable deals.
Love it. Thank you for that intro. You've spent a lot of years helping sales teams really sort of navigate the world of procurement. And let's be honest, nobody likes procurement people. They're the evil.
We're very friendly. Harry, we're very friendly people. We're very friendly people. We're just humans.
Right. And one of the biggest challenges that really sellers face is that procurement is often seen as a blocker, rather than sort of a partner in the deal process. What would you say are the biggest misconceptions about procurement professional and how sellers can shift their approach to work with them more effectively? What would you say?
So I think there are kind of three common misconceptions. First of all, as you say, a lot of sellers think we're the devil. And that's a complete myth, a misconception. We're just another stakeholder with a different perspective, different set of needs. The second one is they believe that if they bury their head in the sand and they ignore us for as long as possible, that's the way to sell a successful deal. And the reality is, once you get into bigger companies with bigger spend and you meet and they've got procurement people managing that spend, the worst thing you can do is avoid us. Because imagine it's a $500,000 deal, Harry, and you've been working with your stakeholder, your budget holder for 9 months shaping this deal. And then they say, all you have to do now is get it past procurement. It's going to end in disaster. And the third thing is, we're not there just to hold a gun to your head. We're not there just to beat you up on price. It may feel like that, and you may allow yourself to be treated like that, but there's ways of dealing with it.
Interesting. I remember we did some research, that's a couple of years ago, and the research says that it's possible to increase your deal size by anything from 30 to 70%, depending on the industry, if you engage procurement early in your sales process.
I'd absolutely concur with that.
Would you? That's great.
Definitely. No, definitely, yeah.
The problem always, and we use this as obviously when we talk to our clients, problem is that salespeople think, as you said, that procurement is the devil. They're squeezing them on price, they're paining their backside. So their natural tendency is to keep them along as away as possible. So they're missing out on 30 to 70% of deal improvement.
Exactly
Would you
right.
find that statement?
Yeah. So, and the reason for that is that if you engage in procurement early, I mean, ideally at the beginning, now I'm assuming here we're talking about B2B sales. It's a B2B Sales Trends podcast.
Right.
They tend to be selling into bigger companies, bigger deal sizes. We're not talking about a 5K deal here. You know, let's pick a number. Let's say it's a 200K deal. The reason that you engage them early is once the spend is material, procurement have a governance process to go through.
Right.
Yeah, they are effectively the guardians and custodians of kind of corporate governance within an organization on the supply side. And so if it's a 200K spend and a salesperson is shaped to deal with the budget holder, and then they finally come to me sheepishly saying, I just need to get this deal signed, well, I've got to go back and go, okay, what's the need? Do we really need this? Is it in budget? What's the scope? What are the KPIs? What are the outcomes? What deliverables? What's the market look like? How many suppliers are there? Who have we used before? What's the market price? So already I lost track. 10, 15 questions?
Right.
Now sales might say, yeah, I can explain all that. And I'm like, I don't want you to explain it.
Right.
I have to independently work out what's the best deal for our business. Should we even do this deal? Is there a different way of delivering it? So the best thing to do is, so a simple tactic, I know one thing you like, Harry, and I do as well, is some practical things you can take away.
Yep.
So I'm imagining someone's listening to this podcast, they're in the car, they might be dropping their children off to school, they could be going to work, they could be on the tube or the train. A practical thing you can do. You run prospecting campaigns to your budget holders. Run prospecting campaigns to procurement. Engage with procurement 18 months ahead of when you're going to engage with them. Pick your top 30 accounts and invite those procurement leaders who run that category, marketing or IT or infrastructure, whatever it is, and invite them to a round table. Like you would your IT directors. And have a breakfast. Talk to them about industry trends. Or if they won't go to a breakfast, run a webinar. They might be camera off. Okay. But at least they're on the webinar. You've got them engaged and you've got them aware. Engage them early, educate, never sell to them at that stage. The moment you start trying to sell to me, my shutters will come down and I'll say, I don't have a need and I'm not being pitched to. Engage me in, where's the industry going? What are the different models? How is AI, obviously very topical, how is AI changing the landscape of that industry? Where can extra value be created in that industry with those solutions using AI?
Interesting. You know, it reminds me a couple of years back, we did an initiative with, can I say the name? I don't think I can, but it was the biggest chemical company in the world. And we work with procurement on how they should be negotiating with their vendors. And one of the biggest initiatives that procurement had was we as procurement need to be seen as an innovation engine internally, which means we as procurement need to dock on the knowledge from the outside world and share it internally. So really be that engine. So when you describe what you've just shared, that really reminds me of that.
I think that's absolutely right, Harry. We were tasked, I've always been tasked, whenever we've been doing something for any organization, they want innovative suppliers.
Yeah.
Now I think the other big thing to underpin this with, Harry, is we have to manage risk. So obviously, you know, what you're looking for innovation with risk management. What you can't have is bleeding edge technology, which is right on the edge of working and not working, which introduces high risk in an area where it's critical to the business. So when you bring innovation into, so when we brought innovation into a business, we'd often look for non-business critical areas. We'd look for, how do I take maybe 5 suppliers who solve a bigger problem for us? How do I take that into one supplier, transform the way that service is delivered, bring innovation to the party, reduce the cost base, and the supplier may get a double in size of value of contract. because they're delivering a lot more value for us in a very innovative way. Or we'd run a pilot. We might take a critical business problem in a relatively small region or in a small industry sector, and we'd pilot something, and we would manage the risk very carefully. And then when we've done that and it's worked, then we might try and scale that. I always say to suppliers, Harry, they say, well, how do I get into a big company? So they've got this PSL, this preferred suppliers list. Again, another tip, how do I get into a big company? And what a lot of them say is, an RFP's turned up. Let's pick a company. Walmart. Walmart have sent an RFP out for a performance marketing campaign for a set of products. Right. And the supplier says, I don't supply to Walmart currently. I'm not on the PSL. I've never worked with them before. We have worked in the sector. The RFP's worth $500,000. We're going to bid for it. And I say to them, you will come second, and they will tell you were a close second. And they say to me, but we haven't written anything down. I said, no, you haven't, no. But you will be told you're a close second. And I know that now at the beginning. Why? Because think about it, Harry. Would you spend $500,000 of your money on a supplier that you've never worked with in an industry that's on tight margins? Unlikely. Right. What you might do, though, is you might spend $25,000 with a new supplier, below threshold, working on something that's innovative, different, important, other suppliers aren't doing, as an experiment. In procurement, I'd certainly review and sanction that. And if the pilot works, then we'll scale it. So how do you enter new clients that you haven't worked with before that are big? You go in with a pilot. You find a stakeholder with a problem that you know you can fix, and you work with them and procurement on saying, let's do a small piece of work with you. Let's innovate. Right. Don't do it for free. Innovate. Try something new on a small scale.
And that will get you on the preferred supplier list. And,
potentially.
And you then have a much better chance of winning the RFP.
Exactly. I mean, as a minimum, you'll have a side letter agreement that says, you're not in the PSL yet, but this goes well. We can add you to the PSL so you can scale up. And then you might get an RFP that says, did a pilot, went really well. We're now scaling that across APAC. You're one of the suppliers that's bidding for it, and you ran the pilot. Well, you now have an inside track. Your conversion rate on that should be over 65%.
So, Mike, this is very interesting. So, would you say that as a strategy, as a business development strategy, it's even viable to say, you know what, instead of targeting our usual stakeholders, you know, the IT manager, the CIO, these kind of people, to stick with, let's say, an example, would you say that a business development strategy is to also start engaging with procurement because the key thing is, a lot of the time our conversations is about raising needs that they haven't considered before, talk about needs that they haven't appreciated before, that they can make an impact to their business. So is that a business development strategy in your view?
Absolutely. And in fact, if I go back to my training in spin selling, you know, remember the spin selling, which is like you have explicit needs and implicit needs. Right. Your job is, as a salesperson, is to uncover those very deep hidden needs. So as a business development strategy, the explicit needs, the ones everyone knows about, and that company has a supplier for, and every 5 years or 3 years they go to market. You don't want to start there. Right. Because on that track, Harry, the worst problem you find as a business developer when you're trying to enter new clients is a really well-educated client. If there's a problem statement that client has solved many times before, and what they're doing is they're maybe increasing the size of the pie, but they're going to market every 2 or 3 years, and they're driving value out of the supplier because they're very, very knowledgeable about how this thing works, that would be a disastrous business development strategy to work on. To your point, find I think as the strategist from INSEAD said, find the blue ocean, find the uncontested area, find something that's a more hidden need that has got a potentially big impact if you scale it up on that organization. Start there.
Right. Interesting. Let's talk a little bit about qualification, because I think that's a topic of interest for our listeners here. A lot of salespeople struggle with qualifying deals in the right way or properly, right?
Yep.
And that leads to time wasted, to an opportunity stalling, and even sometimes they're never going to win these opportunities. And procurement often has a very specific selection criteria. How should the sales team approach qualification really to ensure they're focused on the right deals? And what are sort of the key signals that indicate whether a deal is, truly winnable, is something I can win?
So it's obviously a great question. It speaks to the heart of what a salesperson's looking to do, which is increase conversion rates. So let's start with some data. We know, for example, that let's talk about bigger deals. Let's talk about RFPs, as opposed to consultative selling, which is, I think, a different topic. On RFP-driven deals, often driven by procurement, where there's an incumbent bidding, the incumbent wins over 65% of the time. And there's quite a lot of research to back that up across categories. Now, it's not always true, but broadly, you have to assume as a seller, if the incumbent's bidding and they're doing a good job, they're going to win 65% of the time. Let's take another data point. And I got this from a very clever guy called Blair Enns out in Canada, who's a friend of mine. And he just did some thinking, and I completely agree with the logic. Let's say there are 5 suppliers. The first supplier is the incumbent. So they're one on the RFP list. The next 2 are people, organizations that the buyer knows. They either know them really well, they've worked with them before, or they have been highly referred, highly recommended. You've now got 3 suppliers. The first one's got a 65% win rate, so that leaves 35% left. The next 2, well, they've probably got a win rate each of, let's say, 15%. Let's make the maths easy. So 95% of the win rate is on 3 suppliers. The last 2 suppliers, who I found off the internet, they've got a less than 5% chance of winning that deal. So you've got a 1 in 20 chance of winning. And what happens, Harry, a lot is, and I'll come on to qualification questions in a second, but this sets the scene. What happens a lot is suppliers bid for 20 of those deals and they win 1. They win 1 and the CEO says, I told you, they're worth bidding for. And they carry on. The average deal is about 30 person hours of effort. So 600 person hours of effort has gone into winning a deal. You better make sure that the deal size is big and it's profitable, because that's an awful lot of wasted effort and demotivated teams that you're going to generate. So that's the kind of scene setting. Now let's talk about the question about qualification. So I've just got a few thoughts. There's a framework as well, Harry, that I developed. I know you've got them as well. I've got a qualification framework. Very happy to send that to you afterwards if that's helpful to your audience.
Sure.
But some simple things. Again, let's assume it's a formal process. So let's assume this is an RFP, because a consultative deal is, as we both know, quite different. But unless it's a formal process, it's gone out to market. So there's some kind of document which you're bidding against, a brief or an RFP. First thing, can you meet the economic buyer with procurement for a meaningful discussion before you submit? If you can't, there's no way that I've been able to, in procurement, write down all of the needs across all the stakeholders in a comprehensive fashion that allows you as a seller to form a proposal that's going to hit the spot. You need to have a conversation with the budget holder. So that's number one. Do you understand deeply the business issue or problem or the opportunity that the client's trying to solve? And I mean deeply. Have you solved that problem before many, many times? Third one is competitor landscape. Just talked about existing suppliers, could be internal supplier, could be external supplier. What is that competitive landscape? And do you know why they're looking to change? Is this real or is it just a governance process? The next one's sector sweet spot. Typically, what I'm looking for is you've solved this problem and you've solved it lots of times before, or you've opened up this opportunity and you've opened it up lots of time before in a sector, in my sector. You know my sector really well. You know the sector dynamics really well, and you know how to solve this problem really well. It's what I would call the crosshair. You need that crosshair of sector and problem statement. Next one would be, have they indicated targets and budgets? Do we know what the baseline is? Do we know what they're trying to achieve as a target? Is it realistic? And do we know if they've got a budget? Even the budget range. And then I think the last one before we just open it up to a discussion is, do they have selection criteria? Have they given us a clear indication of their selection criteria? Is it stated in the document?
So what if some of those, they're just not a ticking the box, sort of piece? What if they don't share the selection criteria, for the sake of an example? So is any of the questions that you just shared to qualify, what if you get a negative to some of those? Is it that you're walking away? What's your approach?
Good point. So what I do is I put all those questions into a spreadsheet. I then give each of them a weighting and then a ranking, a score. So I might give, for example, can I meet the budget holder? I might give that a 20% weighting.
Right.
So it's really important.
Right.
And I might give it a score of 1 to 5 because it's never black and white. 1 is, no, you definitely can't. 5 is, yes, you definitely can. But 3 is, you can't meet them on your own. You can meet them with me, but we're going to do it as a session for all suppliers. So you're like, that's not really what I want, because I might reveal things to my competitors I don't want to reveal. But at least it's a live conversation. So that would be a 3. And then you work through all the questions. You put your own weightings in. Then you score it. And it broadly, if you come out with a score of 30%, don't bid. There's a way of not bidding, by the way, Harry, which I'll come back to in a second if you want to explore
love
that.
To hear that.
30% or low, don't bid. Kind of 35, 40% up to 60%. You need to find out more. So you're going to ask them some more questions. Remember, this is before you've written anything. This is your deal qualification, what I would call, most people would call, before it becomes an SQL, a sales qualified lead, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to use my matrix. I'm going to score it. I'm going to find out more information. I'm going to see if it's something that we believe we should bid for. If it's above 70%, your chances of winning that should be over 60% ideally. I expect the win rate of the audience is probably hovering at the 30% mark, and they're wondering how to increase conversion rates. The way to increase conversion rates is to improve your qualification. If you improve qualification, you will increase conversion rates. However, Harry, as we both know, the problem is you increase conversion rates, that's great, but you're bidding for less. So you're bidding for less, and therefore you may not hit the sales quota, the absolute number. But to your point before, if you bid for the right things, the average order value goes up.
Right.
But the average order value goes up and your win rate goes up, then you don't need more in your pipeline.
Right. Yep. Simple as. You're talking about non-bidding. If there's a good way of non-bidding, share that with the audience. That'd be interesting.
So I've got, I do this a lot with my clients. We talk about this a lot. And then they put it into practice without me knowing, because obviously I don't always know what conversations they're having.
Sure.
And I got a message on WhatsApp 2 weeks ago from a very senior client. And she said, you know that thing you talked to us about, Mike, about non-bidding? She said, we did it the other week. She said, we do it quite a bit, but we did it the other week and to a bid. And they said to the client, we really appreciate the opportunity. It's not for us, thank you. There's a few reasons it's not for us, and they listed like 2 or 3 reasons. And they said, and also, we solved this problem a lot for other clients in your industry. What we find is there are 3 big challenges that most buyers aren't aware of, and they're these. We'd be happy to have a conversation with you about those, but we're not bidding for your RFP, but thank you. We appreciate the opportunity. And she said, that client ended up going with them as a supplier.
It's the idea of not closing the door, leaving it open, and providing value in the process. And that typically is something that entices then people to come back, and you have a different conversation then.
You do. And you're building trust, Harry. I think underpinning all this is what you're trying to do as a seller is build trust with your clients.
Right.
And trust is made up of 4 components. There's a great book I still refer to now, written by David Meister and co, called The Trusted Advisor. And I wrote it. I read it back in I read it back in the 90s. You've probably read it. You probably use it with your trading programs. Right. Trust equals credibility plus reliability plus professional relationship building divided by self-interest. The less self-interested you are, i.e. the more interested you are in your client, the more trust increases. The more credible you are, the more trust increases.
Right.
The more you do what you say you'll do, trust increases. And yes, what salespeople are good at, building relationships, trust increases. But most salespeople only leverage one of those 4 factors.
Right. Right. Interesting. Let's switch gears here to the next topic. We talked a little bit in our pre-meeting to this about new rules of how you negotiate effectively. And sales teams often assume that procurement's top priority is price, and you're going to squeeze me on them, and they're leading them to really discount too much, too soon, too quickly in the process. And in reality, procurement is balancing a number of different KPIs, number of different factors. What would you say, is or are some negotiation principles that salespeople should adopt to protect their margins while still landing these competitive deals? What's your experience there?
So this is a favorite topic of mine, Harry.
Yeah.
A really simple thing, but often difficult for salespeople to do in practice. I want to ban the word discounting from the sales dictionary and replace it with the word trade. Stop discounting, start trading. What I mean by that is, if I in procurement say to you, we're almost there, it's kind of like the right scope, right deliverables, right risk profile, blah, blah, blah. However, I've spoken to my bosses and we need 20% off. If you can give us 20% off, I can sign this deal tomorrow morning. Salesperson's desperate. They can see victory within their grasp. They just have to give a discount. They go to their sales director. The 2 of them agree, we can't give you 20%, we can give you 15%. So that is a pure discount. Nothing, there's no way of wrapping that up. It's a pure discount. However, here's an alternative approach. But you need to be in a powerful position to do this. And I'll go through some other principles in a second, but I think this one's really important. You could say, can I just check? Has your budget changed? Have you got less budget than you had at the beginning of the conversation? I understand if that's happened. Business cycles change, budgets change. Has your budget changed? No, it's not necessarily changed. We've got budget. Okay. So we don't do discounting. because to us it's a price chip and it reduces the value of the product. We've already gone through the ROI. We've shown you what the ROI is. But what I can do is I can offer you a better commercial term if you will. For example, in your contract currently, you've got termination for convenience on 30 days notice. If you can wipe that out and take away termination for convenience, and it's a 3-year term, I can give you a 10% reduction in price on that condition. Or an alternative one. Your payment terms are currently 90 days, but we recognize also that cash is king, industry's going through turmoil, and we recognize that that may stretch to 120 days. Not on purpose, but it may happen you're on 120 days. And this is a big deal. So if we can get your payment terms to 14 days, and we can get the payment terms to half up front, we can probably get to 10%. If you breach the 14 days, by the way, after signing contracts, the penalty will be 10% of the deal value per month. Contractually binding. You're trading.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So that's one big principle. Let me give you, well, before I go on to that, what are your thoughts, Harry, on that? I mean, you do this at scale across all sorts of industries.
We do, and we use slightly different terminology, but essentially it's the same. We say you have to eliminate that thinking of giving things away and really implement the thinking of exchanging value through the process.
Exactly.
And essentially it's the same what you're saying. What we find a lot is where our work goes really deep into this is, although when people understand that, okay, I can't just give things away and I need to start trading and exchanging value, good, it's one thing. But then really dig deep in the idea of, all right, so what are all my negotiables? Which ones are high cost to me, low cost to me? Which have high value to them and low value to them? And how do I shake these elegant negotiables then? And that's really next level. And that's something that salespeople typically are really, really bad at.
Exactly right.
That's the experience that we have almost every week.
I completely agree with that. Definitely.
Yeah, it's interesting.
So
share with us another principle.
Yeah, so let's go through a few principles. So relationships matter. You know, going off like a firecracker in the negotiation often is driven by anxiety and fear. So don't do that. Relationships matter. Take your time. I was speaking to a really, really clever guy day before yesterday. He's a LinkedIn leading voice on negotiation, a guy called Kwame Christian. And we were talking about the amygdala, that bit in your brain which fires emotions. And he said something which I thought was really relevant, really true, which is you can't negotiate either yourself or with a counterparty where the amygdala is really inflamed. If emotions are running high, you cannot negotiate in that environment. So relationships matter, focus on the relationship. And the second one is don't start negotiating until you've calmed the mind of both parties. Take the fire and the energy and the anger out of the conversation. Second one, do your homework. You're often dealing with professional negotiators, people like me on the buy side when I was in that role. So if you don't do your homework, you will come off worse. You just will. If this is a big deal, or even if it's a 50K deal, doing your homework in the cab 15 minutes before the negotiation starts is just a bad idea. Number 3 would be have a BATNA. So for those that don't know, a BATNA, best alternative to a negotiated agreement. If you read William Urey's great book called Getting to Yes, it explains that in a lot of detail. You need an alternative so that if you walk away, you have a viable alternative. Next one I'd say is be consistent. Do what you say you'll do. Simple principle. If you're going to come back to them with an NDA, come back to them with an NDA in a reasonable time frame. Don't leave it for a week. Do what you say you'll do on time. Another one would be checking for alignment around objectives. What are your objectives? What are your interests? What are your motivations? What are theirs? Are your objectives and interests aligned? Because if they're not, no matter how the negotiation goes, one side is probably going to feel like this isn't the deal for them. And I think let's just do one more, and then we can have a bit of a discussion. Because I know that if I'm driving and I'm listening, I can't remember more than about 4 or 5 things. Have an inquiring mind. Be curious. Ask questions, but not just random questions. Ask meaningful questions. So I'd say those are a decent set of starting principles, I'd say.
And it's interesting in our experience. It's one thing to understand these principles intellectually. It's another thing for people to really execute them and execute them really well when it's uncomfortable, when the stakes are high, when there is tension involved in the process. And so it's always a bit of a balancing act, but interesting.
But Harry, I think that is about practice. It's about repetition.
Right.
It's about having someone like you. If I was negotiating a deal and I was looking for someone to practice with or bounce the ideas off, I'd call Harry. I go, Harry, could you give me 15 minutes?
Right.
And I've thought this through. I've got a kind of broad set of scripts. Can I try it out on you?
Right.
Try it out on someone that's very experienced, that can give you proper feedback.
Right.
Keep practicing.
It helps. It's just amazing a lot of the times that people just don't prepare for their negotiations. It's the simplest thing to fix, and it's just astounding that's what people don't do. And just like you said, 50 minutes before in the cab ride, saying, "Oh, what is this all about?" So it's just not good enough.
And I think one thing, just on that kind of, Harry, about, and this is probably a more advanced tactic. Once you've done your preparation, and as you say, you've got the hang of that, you've got into a rhythm of doing it, you've got a little template. Before you start the negotiation, before you even get to the negotiating table, what I try and do is I write a set of principles for the negotiation. Objectives, principles, call them what you will. And I send it to my counterparty. This is what's in my mind. This is broadly what I'm thinking about. This is what I think you're interested in and what your objectives are. Can I just check, have we got this right before we kick off?
It's an easy way to gain that information, isn't it?
It is.
Right. It can be so simple. It can be so
simple.
That's right. Mike, we're almost at the end of our time together. I'd like to finish with a question that I always finish with. Share with me, in your experience, buying has changed a lot. There's a lot of stuff that salespeople have to do and have to be good at. What, in your opinion, are the top 3 skills and behaviors that salespeople need to be able to be elite salespeople?
Number 1 would be the ability to build trusting relationships over time.
Yep.
Number 2 would be the ability to be a collaborative solution builder.
Yeah.
Great at asking questions to get to a collaborative solution. And the 3rd would be self-confidence to know when it's time to walk away from a deal if you can't reshape it.
Right. Fabulous insights. To our listeners, build trusting relationships, collaborate on the solution together, build it together, and have self-confidence, not just in the process of those conversations and negotiations, but also know when to walk away. Thank you, Mike. I know our listeners have or will be appreciating very much your insights and your thought leadership on the topic. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Harry, I thoroughly enjoyed it. Really enjoyed it. Thank you for inviting me.
2 calls for our listeners. Go to the B2B Sales Trends.com site, like it, share it, go to YouTube's channel and subscribe it, and share it with people who you think would benefit from the great insights that Mike has shared today. My lovely people, until the next time, look after yourselves and we speak soon. Bye-bye.